Hey folks, it's Cornell from YouTube Fishing Vids here for Mystery Tackle Box. It's transition time. The days are getting longer and the water's getting warmer. It can mean only one thing: pre-spawn bass fishing. Why do we love pre-spawn bass fishing so much? Well, finally these fish are coming out of their winter haunts and they're becoming a lot more accessible. With the water change and the big transition happening, the big fat females with loads of eggs are ready to eat, so we need to find a way to target those fish. So let's go over a few of those options. Y'all just stay tuned. We're going to figure out some of these pre-spawn bass. The pre-spawn transition can be a tricky one. The fish are not always in the same place at the same time. With changing water temperatures and changing conditions in the weather, the fish could be on the bottom, they could be in the middle, and they could be close to the top. So we're going to target shallow fish, suspended fish, and fish that are still hanging out on the bottom. Let's go over some of the best techniques to target each one. One of the best ways to target these pre-spawn bass is to recognize their migration patterns. Coming out of the wintering holes, they're working their way up major creeks, hitting secondary points and pockets on the way. They're staging. A lot of times, depending on the day, with warming weather, they're up shallow. Other times they're suspending over deep water, and at other times they're even way down deep. So right now, with a warming day and this sun beating on the surface of the water, warming it up, I've got myself a Strike Pro glide bait. Glide baits, swim baits, anything from of course the jerk bait is a killer option for the pre-spawn. We're going to hit these secondary points, we're going to hit these secondary pockets, we're going to try and find those aggressively feeding fish and hope to put a few in the boat. The setup I chose for this glide bait by Strike Pro is 12-pound test fluorocarbon, 6'7" medium power, moderate fast action bait casting rod, and a medium speed reel. It's pretty much all you need for a smaller size glide bait like this. This is just a great choice for some of these more finicky bodies of water where they're heavily pressured and they have bait fish like this, a bluegill and or yellow perch. Those kind of bait fish are ideal when it comes to matching the hatch for this specific bait. But when it comes to your lake and your body of water, it just all depends on what the forage fish is. Just match the hatch and those pre-spawn bass will come up and eat them. There's basically three retrieves that I like to use when I'm throwing baits like this Strike Pro glide bait. First, of course, is just a basic retrieve, just a slow, steady retrieve. Let the bait do its work. It's designed to glide and slide through the water like a natural fleeing bait fish. Sometimes that's all it takes to get a bass to chase it down and eat, but sometimes that bass needs a little bit of incentive. So on a slow, steady retrieve, the next technique I use on these baits is to do a basic crawl, creep and crawl, slow, steady retrieve, and then a quick turn of the handle and kill it. What that's going to do is let that bait basically kick around, turn around, and hopefully look at a hungry bass that's thinking about eating it and giving that incentive to react. And that's some of the most aggressive bites you'll ever get on a glide bait. The third is really simple, just a quick burn. Burn that bait back to the boat, and with this Strike Pro, it swims beautifully at a high rate of speed. A lot of times baits don't swim very well when you swim them quick, but this specific bait has a great swimming action even at high speeds. Let the bass tell you what they want. Vary your retrieves. Try all three ideas and maybe make up a couple of your own. Sometimes even a jerking effect like a jerk bait will get that bass to bite. So just mix it up, find out what the fish wants, enjoy fishing your little glide bait. There's no question a bait like the Strike Pro glide bait is a great way to target pre-spawn bass up shallow, but there are times when those bass aren't up shallow. They're off those secondary points out in deeper water suspended. Another really great way to target those suspended bass out deep is with an underspin. And that's the Randy's Swim and Runner by Roadrunner. Just a little itty bitty swim bait and an underspin combo. A little willow blade for a little extra flash and a boot tail for a good extra thump. Great way to cover tons of water and target those pre-spawn bass off the secondary points. Now these baits are great because you can cover the entire water column depending on how far you let the bait sink. Cast the bait out, let it sink to the depth where you know the fish are, and do a slow, steady retrieve. While a slow, steady retrieve is a no-brainer with an underspin, there's a lot of times you can add a little bit of action to the bait by either killing it, letting it stop and sink, or actually giving it a little twitch of the rod tip and getting a little more action to get a reaction bite. You're covering all your bases when it comes to pre-spawn bass fishing. You're fishing up shallow, testing those waters to see if any of those pre-spawn bass are up on the shallow banks. You're fishing on those secondary points out a little bit deeper with things like the underspin. But what happens when they're out deep? What happens when they're not targeting bait fish and they're eating up those crayfish that are crawling around on the bottom? Well, you got to reach for another technique that gets those baits way down deep. Let me pull out another option, give you another technique that works great during the pre-spawn. There it is, folks, the old school favorite, just the Carolina rig. Nothing better than covering the water with a Carolina rig. A 1/2 ounce brass weight with a clacker and a couple beads. Leader, 12-pound test to a Smarts bait. Check out the Smarts bait, Brute. That's just a great creature bait. There's so many different options when it comes to throwing baits on your Carolina rig. It's almost endless. But that happens to be a great bait, just a creature bait to imitate those crawfish that are down there. And when it comes to the setup, just a 7 to 7.5 foot medium heavy to heavy action rod. I happen to have braid on my setup to the actual swivel, leading to a 12-pound test fluorocarbon leader. That gives me the opportunity to break off that 12-pound test leader if I ever get hung up and not lose the whole rig. A lot of times people are going for 15 up to 20-pound test on the main line, just fluorocarbon or even mono, and they use a lighter fluorocarbon leader in a lot of cases, just again so you can break off and not lose the whole rig when it comes to your Carolina rig. I can't tell you how easy it is to fish a Carolina rig and how productive it can be, especially during the pre-spawn. If you've got this bait all ready to roll and you cast this bait out as far as you can across a point, let that bait sink all the way to the bottom, maintain contact at the bottom, and just slowly drag it back to the boat. That brass weight and those clackers and those beads offer a little bit of sound, so it's okay to give it a little bit of a tick of your rod tip to add a little bit of noise to the situation, but basically your creature bait's just slowly dragging behind your setup, looking like a crawfish creeping across the bottom. You'll feel a little tick. Sometimes it's a jarring strike, but in most cases it's just a little tick, and that's when you need to do that really deliberate sweeping hook set. It's just a hook set that buries it into the fish and the fight is on. It's just an absolutely great way to catch pre-spawn bass and fish anytime, but it's also just a really fun technique and it covers tons and tons of water. Another great pre-spawn bass fishing technique for out deep and on the bottom is no-brainer a shaky head. That's the BioSpawn Exo Stick. Super finessey, super great bait for all year round, but during the pre-spawn when those bass are feeding up, a shaky head is what it takes sometimes to get them to bite. If you got a heavily pressured body of water, super clear water, just get yourself a spinning rod, just a 7-foot spinning rod, medium power, extra fast, something like a 12-pound test braid to a 10-pound test fluorocarbon leader. Vary your head sides anywhere from an 1/8 ounce all the way up to 3/8 of an ounce, depending on how deep the water is and how much wind you've got. Drag it back to the boat, give it a little shake, and hold on. Those pre-spawn bass love a shaky head. I hope those techniques help you folks have a great pre-spawn bass fishing season. And if you like what you're seeing here at Mystery Tackle Box, hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, and drop a comment. Don't forget, be sure to visit mysterytacklebox.com and treat yourself to a Mystery Tackle Box subscription for as little as $15 a month.